I used to think that when people said, "You marry the family too," it was just an exaggerated saying, something nosy aunts whispered at bridal showers or old neighbors muttered when they wanted to remind you that life wasn't as simple as boy meets girl, happily ever after. I thought it was harmless advice, the kind you nod along to without really believing it will apply to you. But now, after everything that's happened, I know those words carry the weight of a warning. I should have listened. I should have seen the signs before I signed my name to the biggest mistake of my life. When I first met Daniel, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I had just gotten out of a messy relationship, one that had left me raw and distrustful, the kind of breakup that makes you double-check every smile, every promise, every "I love you" that sounds too rehearsed. But Daniel seemed different. He was steady, practical, with a kind of gentle humor that put me at ease. He wasn't flashy or too smooth. He was the type of man who opened doors without making a show of it, who texted me good night and good morning without ever making me feel smothered. He was safe, or at least that's what I told myself. I remember the first night I met his family. It was a Sunday dinner, the kind of event they treated as sacred. His parents lived in this sprawling two-story colonial in the suburbs, all polished wood and perfectly trimmed hedges. When we pulled into the driveway, my nerves kicked in. Meeting the family always felt like a test, and I wanted to pass. I smoothed down my dress, forced a smile, and walked inside. His mother, Linda, was the first one to greet me. She had the kind of face that looked like it had been sculpted to disapprove, tight lips, sharp eyes that scanned you like an airport security machine. She hugged me, but it wasn't a warm hug. It was the kind of hug that said, "I'm sizing you up." His father, Richard, was quieter, polite but distant, a man who seemed more comfortable behind a newspaper than in conversation. Then there was his sister, Emily, beautiful in that effortless way that made you instantly self-conscious. She looked me up and down with a smirk that wasn't exactly unfriendly but wasn't friendly either. Still, I smiled through it all. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh, complimented Linda's roast chicken, told Emily I loved her earrings. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his silent reassurance that everything was fine. And for a while it was, but there were cracks I didn't notice then, little red flags buried under layers of politeness. Like the way Linda made comments about how Daniel was used to things being a certain way at home, or how she'd say, "You'll see, marriage is more than just love, it's responsibility." Or how Emily would casually bring up Daniel's ex-girlfriends, as if I needed reminding that I was just the latest contestant in some twisted competition. I brushed it off, telling myself that every family had quirks, that once they got to know me, they'd soften. Fast forward 2 years, and Daniel was down on one knee, a ring in his hand, asking me to marry him. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. And in some ways it was. I said yes, of course I did. I loved him. I wanted a life with him. But what I didn't realize then was that saying yes to him meant signing an invisible contract with his family, one that came with terms and conditions I would have never agreed to if I had read the fine print. The first real sign of trouble came 3 months before the wedding. We were in the middle of planning, venue, flowers, seating charts, when Daniel casually mentioned that his parents wanted to talk numbers. I assumed he meant wedding expenses. After all, his family had money, and mine was more middle class. I figured maybe they wanted to contribute or set boundaries. But what actually happened still makes my blood boil when I think about it. We sat down in their perfectly staged living room, Linda with a stack of papers on her lap, Richard flipping through a ledger like he was preparing for a board meeting. Daniel and I sat side by side on the couch, and I remember the way Linda's eyes drilled into me as she slid the papers across the coffee table. "This is what we expect moving forward," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. I picked up the paper, my heart already racing. It looked like a spreadsheet, neatly organized rows and columns, numbers highlighted in yellow. At the top in bold were the words, "Monthly expenses contribution." I scanned the sheet, my mouth going dry. Rent, utilities, family fund, groceries, maintenance, and then at the bottom, circled as if it was the most important line of all, $5,200 monthly contribution. I blinked, thinking I must have misread it. $5,200. Every month. From me, I don't understand, I stammered. Linda folded her hands neatly in her lap. Marriage is a partnership. We believe in financial responsibility. Since you'll be joining the family, it's only fair that you contribute to the household expenses. I looked at Daniel, expecting him to laugh, to tell his parents this was absurd. But he didn't. He just looked at me, his face unreadable, and said, "It's how they've always done things." Always done things? What kind of family demanded their future daughter-in-law fork over more than $5,000 a month as an entry fee to marriage? I felt my chest tighten, anger bubbling beneath my skin. "That's more than my entire salary," I said, my voice sharper now. "Do you expect me to go broke just to marry your son?" Richard finally looked up from his papers, his expression calm but firm. "It's not about the money. It's about commitment. Sacrifice. If you're not willing to invest in the family, then maybe you're not ready to be part of it." Invest. Like I was buying shares in their little empire, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Emily strolled in, holding a leash. Attached to it was a massive German shepherd, panting happily, tongue lolling out. "Oh, and this is Max," she said with a smirk. "He's the family dog. Since you'll be the new wife, you'll be responsible for walking him every morning." Tradition. Tradition. That word clanged in my head like a warning bell. I wanted to scream, to tear that spreadsheet in half and throw it in their smug faces. But instead, I sat there frozen, staring at the leash dangling in Emily's perfectly manicured hand, wondering if I had just walked into a trap I didn't know how to escape. That was the beginning of the end. I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head, the spreadsheet, the smug look on Linda's face, the way Daniel just sat there as though it was normal, as though it was something I should have anticipated. That night, I barely spoke on the ride home. I stared out the window at the blur of passing streetlights, fighting the lump in my throat. Daniel tried to make small talk, as if nothing monumental had just been dropped in my lap, and I remember thinking, is this what marriage to him is going to feel like? Silence in the face of injustice. When we got back to our apartment, I finally snapped, "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted, slamming my purse on the counter. $5,200 a month. And walking their damn dog every morning. What kind of sick joke was that? Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just the way my family does things, okay? They believe everyone contributes. It's not personal." "Not personal." I spat back. "They want me to bankrupt myself to prove I'm worthy of marrying you, Daniel. That's insane. And you just sat there. You didn't say a word." He looked at me then, his eyes tired, almost pleading. "You don't understand. If I go against them, it's going to cause problems. They've always been like this. I need you to work with me on this." Work with him? As if what they were asking was a minor inconvenience instead of a financial chokehold. My stomach turned. I felt like I was standing on quicksand, every word dragging me deeper into a place I didn't want to go. That night, I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love was enough to survive this kind of madness. But then I thought about the life I had imagined with him, the house, the kids, the quiet mornings drinking coffee together, and I told myself maybe it was just a test, maybe if I played along for now, things would calm down. I was wrong. The weeks leading up to the wedding became a blur of suffocating obligations. Linda called me daily with reminders about payments. She had set up an account where I was supposed to deposit money monthly, and when I tried to protest, she said, "If you can't manage this, how will you manage a household?" Her voice dripped with condescension, as though I were some spoiled child instead of a grown woman holding down a full-time job. And then there was the dog. Max. Every morning at 6 a.m., before work, I had to drive to their house, leash him up, and walk him around the block. Rain, shine, snow, it didn't matter. Emily would hand me the leash like she was doing me a favor, smirking as she went back inside to sip her coffee. I hated that dog. Not because he was bad, he was sweet, loyal, and far more humane than the people who owned him, but because he symbolized my submission, the leash they held around my neck. I started to resent Daniel more with each passing day. Whenever I tried to bring it up, he'd brush me off. It's temporary, he'd say. Once we're married, things will get better. But the conviction in his voice was gone, replaced by a dull resignation that told me even he didn't believe it. Then came the betrayal that broke me. One evening, about a month before the wedding, I stopped by his parents' house to drop off a deposit Linda had been hounding me about. I walked in without knocking, the way they had insisted family should, and that's when I heard it. Voices in the dining room. She's already cracking, Linda said, her tone sharp. If she can't handle this, she won't last the marriage. Emily's laugh followed, cruel and mocking. She's so desperate to marry him, she'll do anything we tell her. I almost feel bad watching her walk that dog in the rain. And then Daniel's voice. My stomach clenched at the sound of it, because I wanted him to defend me, to say something, anything that showed he was on my side. But instead he said, just give her time. She'll adjust. She's stubborn, but she'll come around. Come around. Like I was a horse they needed to break. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, the envelope of cash burning in my hand. The world tilted and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I turned and walked out quietly, not wanting them to know I had overheard, but inside, something shattered. That night, I cried until my body felt hollow. I wanted to scream at Daniel, to throw the ring back in his face, but I didn't. Not yet. Because in the pit of my grief, something else had begun to grow. A seed of rage, cold and steady, wrapping itself around my pain like armor. They thought I was weak. They thought they could humiliate me, break me, and I would just accept it. But they were wrong. In the weeks that followed, I played the part. I smiled at Linda, thanked Emily for letting me walk the dog, kissed Daniel like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was planning. Observing. Waiting. Revenge wasn't a word I used at first, it felt too dark, too final, but the more I thought about everything they had taken from me, my dignity, my trust, my peace, the more I knew I couldn't let it go. And when the final betrayal came, it sealed their fate. It was the night of my bachelorette party. My friends had taken me out, trying to cheer me up, though I was too distracted to really enjoy myself. When I came home late, Daniel wasn't there. His phone went straight to voicemail. Something in my gut told me to check his location, something I had never done before, but that night I did. And there it was. His little dot, parked at his parents' house at nearly 2 a.m. I drove there, my heart pounding with a sick mix of fear and fury. When I walked inside, the lights were dim, but I could hear laughter, Emily's laughter, and then I saw it. Daniel and Emily, sitting too close on the couch, wine glasses in hand, his arm draped around her shoulders. Nothing overtly intimate, nothing I could pin down as proof, but the look on her face told me everything. That smirk, that little glint of triumph in her eyes. In that moment, I knew. I wasn't just marrying a man who refused to stand up for me. I was marrying into a family that wanted to destroy me. And if I went through with it, they would succeed, but I also knew something else. I wasn't going to be their victim. Not anymore. The morning after I saw Daniel with Emily, I woke up with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in months. Not calm exactly, but focused. It was as if my body had finally accepted what my heart already knew: they weren't going to change. They were never going to respect me. And Daniel wasn't going to save me. If I wanted out of this nightmare with my dignity intact, I was going to have to save myself. I didn't storm into his apartment and accuse him. I didn't cry or beg or demand answers. No. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to snap, to show my weakness, to prove I couldn't handle their so-called traditions. Instead, I kissed him good morning, made him coffee, and asked him about his night like nothing was wrong. He lied easily, saying he fell asleep on the couch at his parents' house, and I smiled like I believed him. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to leave. Not yet. Walking away would give them the satisfaction of thinking they had broken me. But staying meant I had the chance to turn the tables. I started small. I began documenting everything, screenshots of texts from Linda demanding payments, voicemails from Emily mocking me, even Daniel's emails where he parroted his parents' demands. I kept a notebook hidden in the bottom of my closet, writing down every insult, every humiliation, every moment they made me feel less than human. It wasn't just a diary, it was evidence.at work. I started quietly talking to a lawyer friend, asking hypothetical questions about financial abuse, about what constituted coercion in a marriage contract. He didn't know the full story, but he gave me enough information to realize something important. If I played this right, I could flip the entire situation back on them. Meanwhile, I leaned into the role they wanted me to play. I walked Max every morning, even taking him for longer routes, so I could learn the neighborhood like the back of my hand. I deposited money into their account, but not from my own salary. I opened a separate credit line in Daniel's name, one he never bothered to monitor, and funneled the payments through there. If his family was going to bleed someone dry, it wasn't going to be me. The more compliant I appeared, the more careless they became. Linda stopped hiding her disdain, making comments at family dinners like, "At least you're useful for something," when I cleared the table. Emily was worse. She'd leave her phone unlocked on purpose, sliding it across the table, and I caught glimpses of texts she sent to Daniel late at night. Things like, "She'll never be enough for you." Or, "You know I'd treat you better, did it hurt?" Yes. Every word felt like a knife, but the pain was dull now, almost distant, because I was already imagining how it would feel to plunge those knives back into their perfect little lives. The wedding loomed closer, and with it my plan took shape. I decided I wouldn't call it off, not yet. No, I would let them believe they had won. I would walk down that aisle, smile for the pictures, cut the cake, play the part of the dutiful wife. And then, when they least expected it, I'd pull the rug out from under all of them. The first step was Max. That dog, unintentionally, became my ally. Every morning, I whispered to him as we walked, a silly habit that kept me sane. But one morning, as Emily shoved the leash into my hand, she muttered, "Try not to screw this up. If anything happens to him, it's on you." And that's when it hit me, Max was leverage. They cared about him, even if they didn't care about me. If I could position myself as the one person he trusted, the one person he listened to, then in a strange way, I'd hold power they couldn't take. I started training him quietly, teaching him commands that only I knew. Simple things at first, sit, stay, heel, but then I added others. When I whispered enough, he'd bark and growl, his hackles raised. When I snapped my fingers twice, he'd stop instantly. I fed him treats, gave him affection, and slowly, he became more mine than theirs. While I worked on Max, I also worked on Daniel. I knew he was drifting closer to Emily, emotionally if not physically, but I didn't confront him. Instead, I began planting seeds of doubt. I'd casually mention things Emily said that didn't sit right, watching his brow furrow. I'd leave notes for him to accidentally find, little reminders of how much I sacrificed for him, how much I gave up. It wasn't about winning him back, it was about keeping him unsteady, making sure he never knew exactly where he stood with me. Then came the money. Linda had been keeping meticulous records of my supposed contributions, expecting me to keep paying indefinitely. What she didn't realize was that every transaction was linked to Daniel's credit, not mine. And every dollar she spent, every check she cashed, was another nail in her own coffin. I had a digital trail that painted her as someone extorting her future daughter-in-law. The final piece of my plan fell into place 2 weeks before the wedding. I was at their house, helping Emily with some decorations, when I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. She was on the phone, her voice low but urgent. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Once the wedding's over, he'll realize he married the wrong woman. It won't take long." My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't pain, it was clarity. They didn't just want to control me. They wanted me gone. Emily wanted Daniel, and Linda wanted me erased. And in their arrogance, they assumed I'd just hand him over, broken and humiliated. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the wedding dress hanging on the closet door. I should have felt despair, but instead, I felt a calm, cold exhilaration. They thought they were writing my ending, but what they didn't know was that I had already started writing theirs. I didn't want revenge that would end in screaming matches or public scenes. No, I wanted precision. I wanted them to crumble quietly, piece by piece, until all that was left was the rubble of the perfect little empire they built on cruelty, and I knew exactly when and where to strike: the wedding day.